Alrighty then, welcome in. We are going to find some derivatives of trig functions. Just working through a few examples. I got 3 that I'm going to do, and they kind of increase in difficulty. So you need to memorize these trig function derivative rules. My directions are really simple. Find the derivative. So let's dive in. We've got f of x equals sine of x times cosine of x. I need to recognize this problem as the product of 2 different functions. Okay, so I can think of this as sine of x as one function and cosine of x as another function. I need to apply the product rule because I see multiplication happening. I can't simply take the derivative of sine times the derivative of cosine. That's not how that works. I'm sorry to say, it's a little bit more complicated than that. However, the product rule is there's not a lot to it. It's basically the derivative of one of them times the first one, and then the derivative of the other one times the other one, right? You just take the derivative of each one and then multiply the other one unchanged. So let's do that. We're gonna take sine of x, leave that one alone, take the derivative of cosine, okay? So I'm gonna write this out in another step. So I'm gonna show that I'm taking the derivative with respect to x, ddx, of cosine of x. Now this is an extra step that I show sometimes just to show what I'm actually doing, right? So the first thing was sine of x times the derivative of cosine of x. That's that second piece. Plus the derivative of sine of x with respect to x times cosine of x unchanged, all right? So that's what's happening. We have the derivative is taken for each one, and then it's multiplied times the other piece unchanged. So that step you don't always need to write, but it is important for you to see it, right? So sine of x, this will simplify to sine of x times, what's the derivative of cosine? If you think about the derivative of cosine, that's where the graph starts at the top and it works its way down, so the slope immediately starts going negative. Turns out that that's just going to be negative sine. The derivative of cosine is negative sine. You have to memorize that. Plus, the derivative of sine is at 0, it is becoming positive, so the slope is positive. That's why the derivative of a sine starts with the cosine graph, is cosine. And we're multiplying times cosine again. That is the first derivative. If you wanted to simplify that, you could have negative sine squared x plus cosine squared x. That would be an acceptable answer as well. You don't have to write it like that, but that is your first derivative. So applying the product rule. Let's look at one where it gets a little bit more dicey. We're using trig functions again, and we're still finding the derivative, but it's gnarly looking. We've got a gross fraction. So I need to look at this and think of the high part being this whole piece and the low part being this whole piece right here, okay? So low d high, low times the derivative of high, right? So the low d high is just low times the derivative of the high with respect to x, or whatever variable, minus high d low with respect to x, all over low squared. That's a 2, believe it or not. All right, so low d high minus high d low over low squared. That's what I need to do, and I need to apply it to this really large, gross-looking numerator and denominator. So low d high minus high d low. So f prime of x is equal to low. So I'm going to put that whole low in parentheses, and that part's really important. A lot of people forget that part. So low d high, so the derivative of the numerator. What's the derivative of sine of x? Well, that's cosine of x. What's the derivative of cosine of x? Negative sine. So that's going to be turned into a plus, like that. Those 2 things are being multiplied. That was low d high minus high d low. Hopefully I won't run out of room here. Here's the high part. D low, it's the same idea. Derivative of sine is cosine. The derivative of cosine is negative sine, so this turns into this. There's the high d low, and then all of this is over low squared. So you just have sine of x plus cosine of x squared. Be careful with the parentheses there. That's where a lot of mistakes happen. So it was low. If I wrote that in purple, let's see if I can add to this. Maybe this is pink. Low, that was the low part. This is the d high with respect to x, taking the derivative of the high. Then this was high, and then this was d low with respect to x. And then this was low squared. Low d high minus high d low over low squared. That's all of those pieces. We're going to do one more where you need the second derivative. So I'm going to scroll all the way down, do the second derivative of this one. This came off of a quiz that we had in class. I need the second derivative, so I'm going to take the first derivative, get that answer, and take the derivative of that. Okay? So I've got y equals e to the x times cosine of x. So there are two pieces there, e to the x and cosine of x. Those are two functions, so I need to take the derivative of each one. All right? So y prime is what I want to find first. I'm going to get e to the x times the derivative of cosine, which is negative sine, plus the derivative of e to the x, which is e to the x, times cosine. That's the first derivative. To get the second derivative, y double prime, I need to find the derivative of the first thing, and what I see is another product rule application. It's going to happen twice. So I'm going to do the product rule, and then I'm going to do the product rule again for the other piece, right? So the derivative of this first piece that, maybe I'll highlight it in like blue here. This first piece will be e to the x times the derivative of negative sine, which turns out, if you forget about the negative portion for a second and add it on to the end, the derivative of sine is cosine. So the derivative of negative sine is negative cosine, right? Plus, the derivative of e to the x is e to the x times that negative sine. Plus, let me go back and highlight it. That was all the derivative of that first piece. I did the product rule there, right? That's how I got this down there, okay? And I'm going to do the same thing again, all right? So maybe I'll highlight this in light green. I'm going to do the product rule right here for that piece, and that answer is going to go here. Okay, so I'm going to do e to the x times the derivative of cosine, which we know is negative sine, plus the derivative of e to the x is e to the x times cosine. And looking at that, I see some terms that can cancel out. All right, so I will simplify this just because I can see it. E to the x times negative cosine of the x and e to the x times positive cosine of x are going to be the same term, or the opposite term, so they're going to cancel. And so I'm going to get e to the x times negative sine of x plus e to the x times negative sine of x. So there's two of those. So I can simplify a little bit further, and I'm going to get two groups of this, 2 times e to the x negative sine of x. Now I could bring that negative sign out front if you want, so you could do negative 2 e to the x times sine of x, or you could leave it in there, either way. So that is the second derivative. All you are doing, if I wanted a third, by the way, I would just do the product rule again. Sometimes it's helpful to simplify before you do it again, and other times it's not. I hope that one helps you see it.